Earth had been monitoring the stars for decades, searching for signs of intelligent life. When the signal arrived, it wasn't the dramatic display many had imagined. No spacecraft hovering over major cities, no alien ambassadors stepping onto the White House lawn. Instead, it was a pattern of radio waves detected by the Deep Space Array in New Mexico. Dr. Olivia Palmer was drinking her third cup of coffee when the alert came through. At first, she thought it was another false positive, but as she analyzed the signal, her hands began to shake. This was it. Mathematical sequences that could only be deliberate, patterns too precise to be natural phenomena. "Get me the director," she said to her assistant without looking away from her screen. Now, within 48 hours, the world's leading scientists had gathered at a hastily organized conference. The message contained coordinates for a response and basic translation protocols. After weeks of careful work, Dr. Palmer and her team decoded enough to understand the basics. Earth was being contacted by something called the Concordiat, an alliance of spacefaring civilizations that govern most of the known galaxy. "They're inviting us to send representatives," Olivia explained to the United Nations Security Council. "But not as equals. They classify us as a developing species. We'd be observers only." The room erupted in argument. Some nations viewed this as an insult, others as an opportunity. President Gregory Reed silenced them with a raised hand. "If the most powerful nations in our world can sit at the same table despite our differences, surely we can accept a learning position among the stars," he said, "at least until we prove ourselves worthy of more." After months of debate and preparation, the Earth Coalition selected Captain Frank Hudson to lead the diplomatic mission. A veteran naval officer with diplomatic experience, Hudson had a reputation for calm judgment and unwavering integrity. "I still think this is a mistake," Security Advisor Patricia Welch said during the final briefing. "We're walking into a situation where we have no leverage, no power." "With respect," Hudson replied, "we've been doing that since the first human tribes encountered each other. We adapt. We learn. We find our way forward." The USV Horizon was built in record time, incorporating every advanced technology Earth possessed. It wasn't much compared to what they expected to see among the stars, but it was humanity's best effort. A crew of 200 was selected: scientists, diplomats, military personnel, and specialists from dozens of fields. On the day of departure, millions watched the live stream as the Horizon prepared to leave Earth orbit. The ship would rendezvous with a Concordiat vessel at the edge of the solar system, which would guide them to the galactic hub. Engineer Maya Rodriguez checked the final systems as Hudson entered the bridge. "All systems nominal, Captain. Though I'm not sure our engines will impress our new friends." "It's not our technology they'll judge us by," Hudson said, settling into his chair. "It's what we do with it." The Horizon's departure was broadcast worldwide. Schools closed for the day, businesses paused operations, and for a brief moment, Earth stood united in purpose. As the ship accelerated away from Earth, Diplomatic Officer Alan Grayson joined Hudson on the observation deck. 20 years in foreign service, and nothing prepared me for this," Grayson admitted. Hudson nodded. "Earth politics will seem simple compared to galactic diplomacy." "They've made it clear we're just observers," Grayson said. "How do we change that?" Hudson watched as Earth became smaller in the viewport. "By doing what humans have always done when told they don't belong at the table." He turned to Grayson with a slight smile. "We pull up a chair anyway." As the Horizon reached the rendezvous point, a massive ship appeared, dwarfing Earth's vessel. First contact was about to begin in earnest, and humanity's journey to claim its place among the stars had just begun. The Concordiat vessel that met the Horizon was shaped like a massive silver arrowhead. It dwarfed the human ship, making it look like a child's toy by comparison. Engineer Maya Rodriguez stared through the viewport, calculating dimensions in her head. "At least 3 kilometers long," she whispered. "And those aren't conventional engines." The alien ship had escorted them into what they called the Fold Space Corridor, allowing travel that should have taken centuries to complete in weeks. Captain Hudson had ordered detailed scans of everything, though their instruments could barely comprehend what they were seeing. Their technology is at least 500 years ahead of ours, Maya reported during the daily briefing. Maybe more. The energy readings from their smallest systems exceed our entire planetary output. Hudson nodded. Let's remember that feeling intimidated is natural, but not productive. We're here to learn, but also to represent Earth with dignity. Alan Grayson had spent the journey studying the limited information they had on Concordia Protocol. We need to approach this strategically, he told Hudson. They've classified us as observers, but that doesn't mean we have to act like passive tourists. What do you suggest? Hudson asked. We need to find ways to demonstrate value, Grayson replied. They've obviously classified species on technological advancement, but there must be other criteria we can leverage. The crew settled into a routine during the long journey. Scientists analyzed data, diplomats rehearsed scenarios, military personnel maintained security protocols. They were halfway to their destination when the Concordia escort suddenly dropped out of the fold space corridor. Captain, we're receiving a transmission. Communications officer Natalie Foster reported. There's a distress signal from a smaller vessel nearby. The Concordia ship had already changed course. Their liaison, a towering insectoid being named Sarlacc, appeared on the main screen. A minor delay, Sarlacc announced. A Threlbian transport requires assistance. You will wait here. Hudson exchanged glances with his senior staff. What's the nature of their emergency? It is not your concern, Sarlacc replied. Your vessel lacks the capability to assist. After the transmission ended, Hudson called his team together. Opinions? We should follow orders and stay put, Security Chief Eric Bennett advised. We don't know what we're dealing with. Dr. Palmer disagreed. This is our first chance to interact with another species besides our escorts. We should at least offer help. Hudson considered both perspectives. Foster, can you locate the distress signal? Yes, sir. It's coming from a small moon in this system. Hudson made his decision. Set course. We may not have their technology, but we still might be able to help. The horizon approached the damaged ship, which had crash-landed on the airless moon. Scans showed 3 life forms inside, their life support failing. The Concordia vessel is hailing us, Foster said. They sound angry. Tell them we're simply observing, Hudson replied with a slight smile. Using the Horizon's shuttle, Bennett led a rescue team to the crashed ship. They found the Threlbian crew, small, furry beings with 4 arms, struggling to repair their vessel. Through Dr. Palmer's translation algorithm, they learned the Threlbian ship had suffered damage to its atmospheric system. Though the technology was alien, Maya Rodriguez identified the principles involved. It's just a matter of rerouting their secondary systems, she explained, working alongside the grateful Threlbians. When the Concordia vessel finally arrived, Sarlacc was clearly displeased. This was not authorized, the insectoid stated. We saw fellow travelers in distress, Hudson replied. On Earth, we have a maritime tradition of assisting any vessel in need, regardless of origin. The Threlbians chattered excitedly, expressing gratitude. One of them approached Sarlacc, speaking rapidly. After an uncomfortable silence, Sarlacc turned to Hudson. The Threlbians appreciate your assistance. It seems your primitive vessel had useful attributes after all. As they resumed their journey, Grayson approached Hudson privately. Did you see how surprised they were that we helped? I think we just taught them something about humanity they didn't expect. Hudson nodded, and that's exactly how we'll earn our seat at the table. The galactic hub appeared first as a glowing point of light, then gradually revealed itself to be an enormous ring-shaped structure orbiting a neutron star. The Horizon's crew gathered at viewports throughout the ship, staring in awe at humanity's first glimpse of the Concordia's center of power. It's at least the size of Earth's moon, Science Officer Danielle Warren said, checking her instruments. and it's housing representatives from over 300 species. Captain Hudson watched the massive station grow larger as they approached. Remember, everyone, we're here to observe, but also to understand how we might one day join as equals. The docking procedure took nearly 3 hours, with the horizon guided to a small bay in what they soon learned was the developing species sector. As the airlock cycled, Hudson straightened his uniform and prepared to make humanity's first official contact with the galactic community. The welcoming committee consisted of 5 different alien species, each more bizarre than the last. Their leader appeared to be a tall, crystalline being whose body refracted light in hypnotic patterns. "I am Administrator Kelvo," it said through a translation device. "Earth delegation, you are granted temporary residence in Sector 17. Observer orientation begins in 6 standard hours." The humans were escorted through massive corridors where hundreds of alien species moved about their business. Some resembled Earth creatures, mammals, reptiles, insects, while others defied categorization entirely. Floating orbs of gas, writhing columns of what looked like liquid metal, and beings that seemed to shift in and out of normal space passed by the wide-eyed humans. Their assigned quarters were smaller than expected and located far from the central chambers of governance. The message was clear: Earth was at the bottom of the hierarchy. During orientation, Danielle Warren accessed a public terminal and began researching Earth's classification. What she found disturbed her greatly. "Captain, they've labeled us a resource world," she reported during their private meeting. "That's why we're only observers. They see Earth primarily as a source of biological diversity and mineral wealth, not as a potential equal." Carol Landry, the senior diplomat, frowned. "That's consistent with how established powers have always viewed developing regions. They want our resources, not our participation." "There's more," Warren continued. "Observer status is essentially permanent for most species. Some have been observers for thousands of years. We'd need special dispensation from the High Council to advance." Hudson paced the small meeting room. "So we're expected to sit quietly, watch the proceedings from a distance, and be grateful for the privilege." "That's exactly right," Landry confirmed. "And my diplomatic recommendation is that we do just that for now. We need to learn the system before we can change it." The next day, the Earth delegation was escorted to their observer booth, a tiny space overlooking the vast council chamber. Below them, representatives from dozens of advanced civilizations debated issues affecting the entire galaxy. The humans could watch but couldn't speak. "We can't even hear most of it," Foster complained, adjusting her translator. "They'd limited our access to the general broadcast, not the specific policy debates." As the session continued, Hudson noticed something significant. The power dynamics in the chamber were obvious. A few species dominated all discussions, while many others, though technically full members, rarely spoke. "It's not just us," he said quietly. "Even among full members, there's a clear hierarchy." During a recess, a small amphibian-like being approached their booth. "First-time observers," it asked in perfect English. "I am Vezik from Narubia. We achieved full membership only 80 years ago, after 3 millennia of observer status." 3,000 years, Grayson asked incredulously. Vezik's throat sac pulsed in what might have been a laugh. "You must understand, humans, the Concordiate moves very slowly, and change is not welcomed, especially when it threatens the established order." After Vezik left, Hudson turned to his team. "I think it's time we reviewed the actual Concordiate Charter. There must be formal criteria for advancement." "Captain," Landry warned, "challenging the system directly could jeopardize our position here." Hudson's expression hardened. "What position? We're already at the bottom. The only way from here is up." Captain Hudson divided his team into research groups. For 2 weeks, they scoured the Concordiate's public archives, studying everything they could access about membership requirements and historical precedents. Dr. Palmer worked with alien language specialists to ensure they understood the nuances of the legal texts. "I think we found something," she told Hudson during their morning briefing. "The original Concordia Charter has specific criteria for membership advancement." She displayed the translated document on the room's screen. A world must demonstrate technological sophistication, cultural stability, unique contributions to galactic knowledge, and sustainable resource management. Alan Grayson leaned forward. "The technology part is a problem. We're centuries behind most members. But these other criteria, we might have leverage there. Especially here," Danielle Warren pointed to one section. "Species with exceptional biological or geological diversity that significantly exceeds standard parameters can petition for advancement consideration regardless of technological development." Hudson's eyes lit up. "Earth has more biodiversity than most planets in known space. Our ecosystems are remarkably varied. And we've preserved much of it despite our industrial development," Maya added. "That shows sustainable resource management." For the next 3 days, they compiled Earth's case. Warren analyzed comparative planetary data, showing that Earth's biodiversity exceeded even some senior Concordiate worlds. Grayson documented humanity's cultural achievements, from art and literature to philosophy and ethics. "We need to present this formally," Hudson decided, "not just file it away in their bureaucracy." Carol Landry looked concerned. "Captain, the proper channels would take years, possibly decades." "Then we'll create our own channel," Hudson replied. "The charter also states that any petition may be presented directly to the Council during open session if it pertains to fundamental rights under Concordiate law." "They'll try to stop us," Landry warned. "Let them try," Hudson said quietly. The team prepared meticulously. They studied Council protocol, rehearsed their presentation, and even created visual materials that would translate across species barriers. Hudson practiced his speech repeatedly, refining it with input from Palmer's linguistic analysis. On the appointed day, the Earth delegation entered the observer gallery, as usual. But when the Council moderator announced the period for new petitions, Hudson activated his universal translator and stood. "Point of procedure," he called out. His voice amplified and translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. The chamber fell silent. The moderator, a gaseous being contained in an ornate metallic shell, swiveled toward the human section. "Observers do not have speaking privileges," the moderator stated. "Under Article 7, Section 12 of the Concordiate Charter," Hudson replied steadily, "any world seeking redress of classification may petition during open council." The chamber erupted in murmurs. The moderator conferred with several officials before reluctantly acknowledging, "The procedure is valid, though rarely invoked. You may present your petition." Hudson descended to the chamber floor, feeling the eyes of hundreds of alien species upon him. The main council members, representatives of the most powerful civilizations, watched with what he interpreted as a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. "Esteemed representatives," Hudson began, "Earth comes before you not to challenge the Concordiate's wisdom, but to ask that its own laws be applied fairly." For the next 20 minutes, he presented Earth's case, citing specific charter provisions and displaying the evidence his team had compiled. He showed Earth's extraordinary biodiversity, its range of climates and ecosystems, and humanity's efforts to preserve them. "By your own standards, as written in your founding documents," Hudson concluded, "Earth qualifies for advancement consideration. We ask only that the same rules applied to others be applied to us." When he finished, the chamber remained silent for several long moments. Finally, the crystalline administrator Kelvo stepped forward. "Your petition is unexpected," Kelvo said. "Such boldness is rarely seen from observer worlds." "Perhaps that's why they remain observers," Hudson replied. Kelvo's crystalline form shimmered, a sign of emotion. "Your petition will be considered, but be warned, if advancement is granted, qualifying trials will be assigned. Few species passed these trials on their first attempt." Hudson bowed slightly. "We look forward to the opportunity to try." As he returned to his team, the chamber buzzed with conversation. Something unprecedented had happened. A newcomer species had challenged the established order using the Concordiate's own rules. "What happens now?" Grayson asked quietly. "Now," Hudson replied, watching the council members argue among themselves, "we prepare for their response." The High Council deliberated for 3 days. The humans waited anxiously, confined to their quarters except for scheduled meals and brief exercise periods. When the summons finally came, Captain Hudson gathered his senior team. "Whatever they throw at us, we face it together," he told them. "They're expecting us to fail, so let's surprise them." The council chamber was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. Many seemed drawn by curiosity about the upstart humans who had challenged protocol. Administrator Kelvo's crystalline form dominated the central platform. "Earth delegation," Kelvo announced. "Your petition has been reviewed. The Council acknowledges that by strict interpretation of the Charter, Earth may qualify for advancement consideration." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Hudson maintained a neutral expression, though inside he felt a surge of triumph. However, Kelvo continued, "As is customary, you must complete 3 qualifying trials to demonstrate your worthiness. These trials test qualities essential for Concordiate membership." The massive display behind Kelvo illuminated with images and text. "First, you must resolve a resource crisis on Deneb IV without depleting its rare minerals. Second, you must navigate the Mirian Nebula hazards to retrieve a historical artifact. Third, you must mediate a territorial dispute between the Vox and Krull species, a conflict that has resisted resolution for 2 centuries. The chamber filled with murmurs again, this time with a hint of amusement. These were clearly tasks designed to be impossible for humanity's current capabilities. "You have 20 standard days to complete all 3 trials," Kelvo concluded. "Should you fail any of them, Earth will remain in observer status for the next 50 years. As they left the chamber, Carol Landry was furious. "This is a mockery. They've given us challenges requiring technology we don't possess." Vincent Brooks, the military strategist who had been quietly observing until now, spoke up. "Maybe that's not the point. Maybe we're not supposed to approach these like they would." Hudson looked at him. "Explain." "They're expecting us to fail because we lack their technology," Brooks said. "So we need to solve these problems without relying on technology." The team divided into 3 groups, each focusing on one challenge. Brooks led the Deneb IV resource crisis team, studying the problem from every angle. "The planet's ecosystem is collapsing because they're removing stabilizing minerals from the soil," he explained during their planning session. "They've been trying increasingly complex extraction methods, but that's making it worse." "What if we don't extract it all?" Maya suggested. "What if we find a way to replenish the minerals naturally?" They developed a solution using Earth's own history of regenerative agriculture, proposing a system that would allow Deneb's soil to heal itself. When they presented this approach, the Concordiate scientists were visibly surprised. For the Mirian Nebula challenge, instead of attempting to build a ship that could withstand the hazards, the team studied the nebula's energy patterns and identified a narrow pathway that appeared only once every few days. "It's like waiting for the tide to go out," Danielle Warren explained to the council observers. "We don't need to force our way through if we can time our approach correctly." The territorial dispute proved the most difficult. The Vox and Krull had been fighting over a small star system for generations. After analyzing both cultures, Dr. Palmer identified a shared cultural value, ancestral honor, that neither side had recognized in the other. "They're fighting because they think the other side dishonors their ancestors," she explained. But both cultures had elaborate ancestor reverence rituals. The human team proposed a shared memorial space where both species could honor their dead, transforming the disputed territory into a place of mutual respect rather than conflict. As the 20 days drew to a close, the council reconvened to evaluate the human solutions. Each approach had worked, though none in the way the Concordiate had expected. "Your methods are unusual," Administrator Kelvo admitted. You relied on adaptation rather than technological superiority. That is humanity's greatest strength, Hudson replied. We have always had to find ways to overcome limitations. The council members conferred quietly. Finally, Kelvo turned back to the humans. All 3 trials are deemed successful, though by unorthodox means. The council must now deliberate on Earth's status. As they left the chamber, Hudson noticed representatives from several other observer species watching them intently. Something had changed. The impossible had been accomplished, and not just for Earth's benefit. They're watching us, Grayson whispered. All the other junior species. The day after completing the trials, a small delegation approached the humans' quarters. They weren't Concordiate officials, but representatives from other observer species. The group included Vezic, the amphibian-like Neruvian they had met earlier, along with beings from 4 other worlds. Your solutions have caused quite a stir, Vezic said, blinking his large eyes. No observer species has ever completed all 3 trials on their first attempt. Natalie Foster, who had been monitoring communications throughout the hub, invited them inside. Captain Hudson listened as each visitor shared their own experiences with the Concordiate's rigid hierarchy. My world has been an observer for 700 years, said a feathered being with 4 wings. Each time we petition for advancement, the requirements change. Others told similar stories. Some had been denied for lacking technology, others for resource limitations, and still others for supposed cultural incompatibilities. This isn't just bureaucratic inefficiency, Grayson said after the visitors had left. It's systematic exclusion. Foster nodded. I've established secure channels with 12 observer species now. They all report the same pattern. The Concordiate keeps moving the target. But why? Dr. Palmer asked. What purpose does it serve to keep so many worlds permanently subordinate? Hudson had been silent, piecing together what they were learning. Control of resources, he said finally. Observer worlds can be mined, harvested, and studied without having any say in Concordiate policy. Over the next week, Foster expanded her communication network. Using encryption methods developed on Earth, she created a secure system that allowed observer species to share information without Concordiate monitoring. We're not alone in our frustrations, she reported. There are over 40 observer worlds that have been denied advancement despite meeting published criteria. Meanwhile, Danielle Warren had been digging deeper into the Concordiate's financial and resource allocation systems, accessing data through public terminals. Captain, I found something concerning, she said, displaying a complex chart. Resource extraction from observer worlds has increased by 300% over the last century, but the benefits flow almost exclusively to 7 senior member species. Hudson stared at the evidence. They're running an empire disguised as a cooperative. When the council finally reconvened to rule on Earth's status, Hudson and his team were prepared for their decision. They weren't surprised when Administrator Kelvo announced their petition was under extended review, effectively a denial without formal rejection. We appreciate the council's thorough consideration, Hudson replied diplomatically. While we await your decision, Earth requests access to the historical archive concerning previous advancement cases. This seemingly innocent request made Kelvo's crystalline form shimmer with agitation. Such archives are restricted to full members. Actually, Grayson interjected smoothly. According to Statute 47B, observer species involved in active petitions are entitled to review precedent cases. The Council had no choice but to grant access. For the next 3 days, the human team worked around the clock, analyzing hundreds of advancement cases. What they found confirmed their suspicions. The system was deliberately designed to maintain the power of founding members. More disturbing were the financial records showing massive resource transfers from observer worlds to senior members, resources taken at prices far below market value due to one-sided trade agreements. This isn't just unfair, Hudson told his team. It's exploitation on a galactic scale. They compiled their findings into a comprehensive report, but rather than presenting it only to the Council, Foster shared it with their growing network of observer species. They need to see this evidence, she argued. If we all confront the council together, they can't ignore us. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Representatives from 28 observer worlds requested an emergency joint session to address systemic inequities in Concordiate governance. When Concordiate security officers appeared at the humans' quarters the next day, no one was surprised. Captain Frank Hudson, the lead officer, stated, "You and your senior staff are summoned to appear before the High Council immediately on charges of sedition and conspiracy against the Concordiate." Hudson exchanged glances with his team. "It seems we've struck a nerve. What do we do now?" Palmer asked quietly. "Now," Hudson replied, straightening his uniform, "we show them what happens when you corner humans." The High Council chamber was packed beyond capacity. News of the charges against the humans had spread rapidly throughout the hub. Representatives from nearly every member species crowded the gallery, while the accused, Hudson and his senior team, stood in the center of the chamber. Administrator Kelvo's crystalline form seemed to pulse with energy as he read the formal charges. "Earth delegation, you stand accused of inciting dissent among observer species, unauthorized access of restricted data, and conspiracy to undermine Concordiate authority." Hudson stepped forward. "We deny all charges. We've acted in accordance with Concordiate law at every step." "You have organized secret meetings with other observers," Kelvo countered. "The Charter guarantees freedom of association among all species represented at the hub," Grayson replied immediately. Kelvo's form flickered with what the humans had learned to recognize as irritation. "You have accessed and distributed sensitive financial data." "We accessed only public records," Warren responded. "If the Concordiate considers its resource allocation sensitive, perhaps that is itself cause for concern." The debate continued for hours, with the council becoming increasingly frustrated by the humans' knowledge of Concordiate law. Finally, the senior counselor from the Draxis hegemony, a towering being with metallic skin, spoke. "This charade has gone on long enough. Earth clearly seeks to disrupt the order that has maintained galactic peace for millennia. I move that their observer status be revoked immediately and their planet quarantined." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Quarantine meant isolation. No contact with any Concordiate species, no trade, no technological exchange. Hudson had anticipated this. He looked to Natalie Foster, who nodded slightly. "Before the council votes," Hudson announced, "I invoke Article 33 of the Charter, which permits accused parties to present exonerating evidence." The council reluctantly granted permission. Hudson activated a data cube, and the chamber's main display filled with documents, charts, and historical records. "What we present isn't just our defense," Hudson explained. "It's evidence of systematic corruption within the Concordiate's highest levels." The display showed resource extraction records from dozens of observer worlds, alongside financial transfers to private accounts held by senior council members. Trade agreements clearly violated the Concordiate's own fair exchange principles. Advancement petitions from qualified worlds had been denied based on criteria that weren't in the official charter. "For over 3 centuries, Hudson continued, his voice steady, "the senior members have manipulated the system to maintain their power and privilege, while denying advancement to qualified species." The chamber erupted in chaos. Junior members demanded explanations, while senior counselors called for the presentation to be stopped. In the midst of the uproar, the doors to the chamber opened, and representatives from 22 observer worlds entered in a unified procession. Vezek, the Nerubian, stepped forward. "We stand with Earth. These findings confirm what many of us have suspected for generations." Administrator Kelvo struggled to restore order. "This is unprecedented. Observer species have no standing to address the full council." "Actually," came a voice from the gallery, "they do." A representative from one of the mid-tier member worlds stood. "Under the original charter, which I have spent my career studying, any species may address issues of governance affecting all worlds." One by one, Representatives from junior and mid-tier member worlds rose to support this interpretation. What had begun as charges against Earth had transformed into a constitutional crisis for the entire Concordiat. As the debate raged, Kelvo approached Hudson privately. "Do you understand what you've done? The Concordiat maintains order across thousands of worlds. This chaos could lead to interstellar conflict, or it could lead to reform," Hudson replied. "Earth doesn't want to destroy the Concordiat. We want to help it become what it was meant to be, a true cooperative of equals." Kelvo's crystalline form dimmed slightly. "The senior members will never accept such changes voluntarily." "Then they face a choice," Hudson said. "Reform or watch your alliance crumble. Already 22 observer worlds stand with us. How many more will join if you reject reasonable change?" After hours of heated debate, the council called a 3-day recess to consider the situation. As Hudson and his team were escorted back to their quarters, now under guard, Dr. Palmer approached him. "I've been translating some of the oldest Concordiat texts," she said quietly. "I found something remarkable. The original purpose of the Concordiat wasn't dominance, but true cooperation. Over time, that vision was corrupted." Hudson nodded. "Then we need to remind them of their founding principles. When we return to the council, we won't just make demands. We'll offer a path forward." "And if they refuse?" Grayson asked. "Then Earth leads an alternative," Hudson replied, determination in his eyes. "Either way, the galaxy changes now." For 3 days, the galactic hub buzzed with activity. Species that had never communicated directly now exchanged ideas and grievances. The humans found themselves at the center of a diplomatic revolution, with their quarters becoming an unofficial meeting place despite the guards stationed outside. Dr. Palmer worked day and night translating the original Concordia founding documents she had discovered in the archives. These ancient texts revealed a vision far different from the current reality. A cooperative of equals designed to share knowledge and resources for mutual benefit. The founding species never intended this hierarchy, she explained to representatives from a dozen worlds gathered in their common room. The tiered membership system was meant to be temporary, a way to integrate new species gradually. When the council reconvened, the chamber was transformed. Instead of the usual seating arrangement with senior members at the front, representatives had rearranged themselves, with observer species interspersed among full members in a visible show of solidarity. Administrator Kelvo and the senior counselors entered to find their usual seats occupied by a mixed group of junior members and observers. After a moment of confusion, they took positions at the center of the chamber. "This irregular arrangement is not recognized," Kelvo began, but the unified response from the gathered representatives drowned out his objection. Captain Hudson stepped forward, carrying a data cube containing Palmer's translations and a proposal developed with input from 47 worlds. "Esteemed representatives," he began, "we come not to dissolve the Concordiat, but to renew it, to restore it to its original purpose." He activated the cube, displaying the ancient texts alongside their modern translations. "The Concordia was founded as a true cooperative," Hudson continued. "Its purpose was to unite diverse species in peaceful exchange of knowledge and resources. Over time, that vision was lost as power concentrated among a few founding members. The display shifted to show their proposal, a reformed charter based on the original principles but adapted for the current galactic situation. We propose a restructured governance system," Hudson explained. "One with rotating leadership positions, transparent resource-sharing protocols, and clear, objective criteria for advancement that cannot be manipulated." The senior counselors exchanged glances. The Draxis representative stepped forward. "And if we reject this proposal, what then? Revolution? Chaos? Then 28 worlds will withdraw from the Concordiat immediately," Vezek announced, rising from his seat. "We have already signed a mutual recognition pact." The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. A mass withdrawal would fracture galactic politics and trade networks that had stood for millennia. The most ancient counselor, a being of pure energy contained in an ornate vessel, moved to the center of the chamber. In thousands of years, it had rarely spoken directly in council sessions. "I remember the founding," the elder said, its voice resonating strangely in the minds of all present. "This human speaks truth. We have strayed from our purpose." For hours, representatives debated specific points of the proposal. The humans participated actively, with Grayson negotiating diplomatic details, Warren addressing resource allocation, and Palmer clarifying historical context. As the discussions continued, it became clear that most species, even many senior members, recognized the need for change. The current system had grown increasingly unstable, with junior members increasingly restless under senior domination. Finally, after nearly 20 hours of continuous negotiation, a framework agreement was reached. The Concordiate would be reformed into the Galactic Assembly, with a rotating council drawing members from all tiers. Observer status would be limited to a maximum of 50 years, with clear advancement criteria established. As the agreement was formalized, Administrator Kelvo approached Hudson. "You have changed the course of galactic history," the crystalline being said. "Not through superior technology or military might, but through principles and persistence. That's the essence of humanity," Hudson replied. "We've spent our history overcoming limitations by working together and thinking differently." 1 month later, the newly formed Galactic Assembly held its first session. Earth had been granted full membership, along with 7 other former observer worlds. Captain Hudson watched from a new permanent Earth embassy as representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered as genuine equals for the first time in millennia. Maya Rodriguez joined him at the viewport overlooking the chamber. "When we left Earth, I thought our greatest achievement would be simply getting a seat at their table," she said. Hudson smiled. "Instead, we helped build a new table altogether." Below them, the assembly began its work, with species from across the galaxy finally united not by hierarchy, but by common purpose. Humanity had not just claimed its place among the stars, it had helped reshape the very nature of that place, proving that the most revolutionary force in the universe wasn't advanced technology, but ideas and the courage to stand for them.